We've got three tremendous individuals with us today to help tell us about how successful farm transition can take place. And we're going to start with ladies first. I'd like to introduce to you, first of all, Betsy Bullard, and she hails from Turner, Maine. She graduated from Cornell University in '96, and after 7 years at Cargill Animal Nutrition, she returned with her husband Bill to Burgeen Farms. And I think this is something that if you haven't read about Burgeen Farms in Maine, or if you didn't read this bio, that farm has been in existence since 1777. Let that sink in for a moment. 1777. Have there been a few transitions at Burgeen Farms? Yes, there have. And we're going to learn today about how the current generation is managing that facility. Her role centers around the breeding program and cow care for this entirely registered Holstein herd, and it includes active IVF and ET programs as well as a show program. Betsy is extremely active in the New England Holstein Association and currently serves as our Region 1 Director for Holstein Association USA. She's also a Class 4 graduate of the Young Dairy Leaders Institute and a graduate of Cornell University's Dairy Executive Program, and has served as a director for the Maine Dairy and Nutrition Council since 2018. Betsy is married to Bill, and they have two children, Sydney and Will, and no big surprise, those kids are actively involved in youth programs related to the dairy industry as well. So as a family, they also own Canty Cow Creamery, an on-farm processing or micro creamery that serves delicious frozen custard from their high-quality milk. Please join me in welcoming Betsy Bullard to our panel today.
Well, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to chat about this a little bit today. And well, you excuse me if my technological skills aren't quite up to it, but I think I have an emergency eject button here in my hand. So if I need to do that, just give me a little grace on that. Oh, look at that. So as Lisa said, Burgeen Farms was founded in 1777 by settler Daniel Briggs. They didn't tell him how many rocks that Maine grows really well, but he said, sure, I'd like to move to Turner. So that was the start of Burgeen Farms. And you can see that's kind of that original long ago drawn out on what served as a bar napkin then. I think those original lots in Turner where we still reside. So the history of Holsteins in Burgeen has been pretty fantastic. My grandfather, H.C. Bill Briggs, is there in the photo that's kind of sepia-toned, clearly holding forth on something to do with the fantastic Holstein cow. So that's been pretty baked into our history. So my grandfather began our journey with registered Holsteins. You can see some transitions in the physical plant of the farm there from kind of a farmhouse. And just a note to self, weather like this is not what we usually experience in Maine, so our houses and barns were connected so that folks didn't have to actually go outside for months at a time. We're the mole people. So our transition story that we've been intimately involved in began in 2000 when my husband Bill and I moved to Turner. What we moved back to was a 55 cow tie stall that I think the most previous physical plant updates had happened in about 1955. We decided that we were better suited to working for ourselves than working for someone else. So that was kind of the driver for us, is to have a scenario where if we worked hard, it was for our own family and kind of our own. We're happy to accept the risk, but kind of wanted the rewards as well. We have a picture that has my husband and I, my parents, Steve and Mary, and my grandmother, Alice. So our picture of the three generations in the previous slide, that was our first transition. We kind of did two transitions kind of concurrently. When we arrived in 2000, Bill and I came with some assets of our own, assets in the form of cows. When we started, we were employees of the farm. We're not owners right out of the gate. The first transition we needed to navigate was the previous generation really fully transferring from my grandmother's generation. The farm was incorporated in 1973 as a sub-S corporation. The shareholders were my father and my grandmother. So given my grandmother's age and that my grandfather had passed, we had a transition to solve there first. My father had 5 other siblings, none of whom were involved in the farm. So that was quick primer in getting used to uncomfortable conversations right out of the gate. With 5 off-farm siblings and an area that we're 45 minutes from Portland, Maine, which is a little bit more populated than Turner is, we needed to navigate that transition of not only 2 generations of shareholders, but also those off-farm siblings who believed that there were some assets that certainly wanted to come their way. So that was our first project we completed in 2002 over some interesting conversations. And I guess the big thing that I would like to say right out of the gate is, if you're looking to get into a transition sort of project, get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. Find yourself advisors who are going to ask you the questions that there aren't easy answers to. That was very helpful for us. Our previous speaker talked about figuring out those advisors that are going to help you in that process, and I would wholeheartedly second that. Figure out the people that are going to ask you those questions and give you food for thought. In 2002, we managed to wrap up that process, and in learning what that looked like with some off-farm siblings and some interesting structures with an undivided half of a corporation and some assets that were held not very clearly in the corporation, we agreed with my parents that we needed to have some sort of plan in place to transfer the corporation to Bill and myself. So that's kind of what we see. In this slide, the farm began to grow. One of our goals was to ensure that we had a farm business that was viable enough so that we didn't depend on off-farm jobs, which for the first few years we did. We did both have off-farm jobs, and we felt like it was important for our family and for our long-term goals to have a farm business that was viable enough that it would support our family. We kind of like the idea of all the families being able to buy groceries like every week, not alternating weeks kind of thing. So in 2006, we embarked on some additional expansions. We grew cow numbers to about 400 cows at that point, built some barns that were not tie stalls. The prior phase involved growing cow numbers to about 150 cows. We had a bedded pack. Cows were super happy, the people not so much. We had neighbors that would drop off baked goods because Bill and I may have transitioned from some nutrition jobs that involved a lot of driving and fast food and stuff like that. And neighbors commented that, well, Betsy's husband seems lovely. I don't know why she doesn't feed him. So we did transition to free stalls and a little bit more automation and trying to get more efficient, trying to make sure that we were crafting a business that would be viable long term. In the picture there we have my grandmother Winnie, my mother, myself, and Munchkin Sydney. If you happen to see her looking all adultish, you can remind her that picture exists, and now you've all seen it too, which is super. So over the course of that 2003 to 2012, we transferred shares in the corporation of Green Farms, Inc. to Bill and myself, and at that point, we're sole owners of the corporation. I think back to that idea that you have to have advisors that are advisors, or whether you call them advisors, you call them, whatever you call them, that they're gonna ask you those questions. Why are you doing things a certain way? We transferred in 2009 all of our crop enterprises. We were very fortunate to have another local farm that had a younger generation that was interested in machinery and interested in cropping. So we sold our crop equipment to them. We now purchase all of our feeds, so we just focus on cows. And if you saw me fumbling around with this, not even that automated sort of escape button here, you know that nobody wants me working with equipment. So we could focus on the cows. We've been doing that since 2009. We've continued to grow the farm. I think from a transition standpoint, the ownership transfer was probably the easier part of the transition for us. I think there are a lot of conversations that go along with how does the older generation fit in? What's their role? I would love to tell you that we have that 100% figured out. That was probably not accurate. That's an ongoing set of conversations, and again gets back to that. Find folks that are willing to ask you uncomfortable questions and how to navigate those, as a family, and how to navigate them as they pertain to the business is pretty huge. An ongoing process. The question earlier for our first speaker of how long does that process take? I don't think that process stops. I think that process is ongoing and is definitely an interesting one. So some other photos here. Like I said, the registered Holstein cow has been a big part of our process. It's a big part of our identity as a family, and that's something that we've maintained as we've grown the herd, and that's offered us some opportunities to gauge and I think kind of support our kids' interest in the business, because some of that centers around some of those activities that are really specific to registered Holsteins. We also, I think, as a matter of necessity, we're in Maine. You may or may not be aware that Maine's not a huge dairy area or a huge agricultural area. It's also not on the way to anything else. So we have some pretty unique parameters as far as transportation and as far as infrastructure are concerned. So we try to be somewhat creative. I will say that we have kind of a unique advantage. The 10 generations in one place, 10 generations on one farm means it's pretty important for us to look for outcross genetics periodically. Like that, what did somebody tell me this morning that describing a family tree as a hula hoop? So we try to avoid that. My husband Bill is not from a farm. He's not from Maine, so he comes to this with a different sort of perspective that's a lot more analytical, I think, than some of our forebears might have been. I have a picture there of calves and group housing. So we try some things and then we are not afraid to not do them anymore if that's not working well. We no longer have calves group housed. It was a fun experiment for 9 years, but moving forward. And there are the kids again. We do a lot of building. We do a lot of things in-house. I think one of the things that we've tried to do through all these transitions is try to play to our strengths. Again, I try to stay away from equipment. Everybody's happy when I do that. Everybody's happy when my husband has some graph paper in hand. Then they know that there's some sort of project ongoing. So again, our focus has been on making sure we're making the changes so that our farm is going to be viable long term. So a lot of that means infrastructure sorts of things, infrastructure on the farm. There's a lot of things that we need to do that are kind of duplicative because we don't have 6 or 8 or 10 or a dozen farms down the road. So we make things up as we go, which is exciting, always. And some more family pictures. My mother's not here to defend herself, but there are striking similarities between the Bernie Sanders picture and a classification day photo. So that's always good. And I feel like there's one photo there where you could caption this. There's my sister and my mother and my daughter, and you can only imagine what they're chatting about on the cow side. My intro, the bio, indicates that we have the Canty Cow Creamery. So, I mentioned earlier that we're okay with trying things, seeing how it works, seeing if it's a fit, and if it's not a great fit, it's okay to say, no, we're not interested in doing that anymore. We have that kind of on a pause right at the moment because, again, back to those advisors that'll ask us the questions that might not be comfortable. We had a gentleman that we've worked with for a long time working through Dairy Farm Business Summary information that kind of asked us one morning, so tell me more about the creamery. Which one of you, when you get up in the morning, says, yeah, that's the thing I'm going to do first? And there was a super awkward silence that ensued, and we kind of looked around the room and realized, oh, you mean which one of us? Well, neither of us really. He said, well, so that should probably give you some idea as to what resources you should be putting towards that. So that's change is kind of the constant. The Holstein cow's been a consistent thing. Family's been a consistent thing. And our transitions, the two that we went through in 2002 and leading up to 2012, 2013, we thought, great, that's fantastic. We're all set with that. And then all of a sudden our kids are getting older, and that's a whole new perspective to think about. How do we plan for that? What are the conversations we're having about that? And again, I think the planning, the advisors, find yourself some advisors that will ask you the questions, will force you to answer those questions, and be creative. That's kind of been been our thing. Again, planning for the future. If we have a farm that's viable long term, that's great. We can have a conversation about transition. If it's not viable, we might as well just all have dinner together and talk about something else. The Red Sox, I don't know. I'm also not a sports person either, neither mechanical nor a sports person. So there we are. And that was kind of a neat picture. That was a New England Holstein picnic in 1955 that was hosted at our farm in front of my grandparents' farmhouse that was attached to the barn. Of course, we're still in Maine, and that's now a milk house kind of operations center for the farm today. So change is the constant there. And there we are. I have no idea where I'm at on time. I'm sure Lisa will keep me on track there, but that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of our journey so far.
Over the past 12 years, Trent and Kelsey have built Trentway Genetics from the ground up, and they've grown it into a nationally and internationally recognized name specialized in balanced breeding and type cows and red carrier genetics. Their herd currently consists of 400 cows and 600 young stock, and their rolling herd average is 28,483 pounds of milk with a 4.0 fat and 3.2 of protein. They've also bred 83 excellent cows, and the Trentway prefix has 45 bulls in AI at this time. And it's not mentioned in this, but if you're looking at Trent and you're saying, boy, that guy looks slightly familiar, and that, well, it may be because he was recognized last year as the 2024 Distinguished Young Dairyman at this convention at Utah last year. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to turn this podium over to Trent Hendrickson.
Well, I guarantee I won't be as good on the mic as Lisa and Betsy, but we'll fumble through this and kind of tell you our story. And like Betsy, I'm not the technology one of the farm. That's my wife, Kelsey. So from the beginning, I guess I got my background growing up. My mom and dad owned Jeffrey Way Holsteins, and through their passion in the industry, really provided me with my infrastructure of what I wanted to do. We were involved in junior Holsteins and showing, and that really set my parameters on the Holstein cow. And then growing up, my dad and mom had a herd that they sold bulls and had visitors from all over the world, and I always wanted to do that like they did. I went to University of Wisconsin-Platteville, graduated in 2010, and then returned to my family's farm for 1 year. And at that time, we were kind of looking for other farms nearby, but we ended up kind of striking out on any farms close by. Ideally, we would have liked to have farmed side by side, but had separate herds. But kind of came down to a different set of circumstances. One, obviously, I'm not the person to go up and just talk to too many people. I'm kind of shy and stand back. So one night we were out, and I saw Dave Erickson. He was the one that we took the farm over from out, and I had enough courage to go up to talk to him, and I always enjoyed his farm, going to dairy judging and the set of cows he had, and I knew that both of his sons showed with us. They were a little bit older, and they weren't returning to the farm. So I somehow had the courage to ask Dave. I said, Hey Dave, what is the plans on the farm? And he said, I got a young guy here that's milking the cows for me, and he'd like to buy the cows and take over the herd. And I said, okay, well, if someday you ever that it changes or whatnot, just know that I'm looking for a farm, and I'd be interested in working with you. And so then it wasn't about a month later, I get a phone call from David Erickson. And I thought, oh, man. And he says, well, my guy is going to go hoof trimming and decided he doesn't want to buy the cows. So I would be interested in sitting down and talking with you. And so then one day Dave came over and sat down with my parents and me, And we sat at the kitchen table, and we developed an agreement, and we had a little input of how to structure the agreement, but we had no formal contract. We shook hands, and that's kind of how it started. So it was in December of 2011. We first started out with a 60-40 milk check split. Dave owned all the buildings, equipment, provided all the feed. I owned all the cattle and anything that had to do with the cows. The cows are my cows. And then, like any updates, Dave pretty much took care of it. I had the protein bill, the semen, the milk house equipment, and all those type of things. So when it began, we started off with 47 cows and 12 heifers. Majority of the cows we purchased from my mom and dad, and then I first got my first animal when I was 7 years old. It was a red and white. Kind of started my red and white passion, and from my uncle as a golden birthday. He was my godfather, and that kind of started the reds, and it started my own herd. So when I came over, I think I had 18 cows of my own already that I started with at mom and dad's, and then a few heifers. And then our goals were just high quality registered. I had an idea that we were going to milk 50 cows and have show cows, and that was going to be our thing. So then kind of the transition, we hired some extra help. My wife was working off the farm at that time, and so we needed a little extra help around the farm. And then as soon as our 7-year-old son now was born, my wife came back to the farm full-time, and we started a full-time partnership working hand in hand together. And at that point, we purchased the farm from Dave because we wanted to expand. We wanted to build a freestall barn and have some dry cow and heifer facilities. So we purchased the buildings and 60 acres from Dave and built a freestall barn. So just kind of a timeline in our fast-paced life is in the first year, we switched the milk check split to 50-50. It was the first year, it was a really dry year, and Dave had to buy some extra crops, and it just kind of took a little while to kind of figure out how to make everything work. So we switched it to a 50-50 milk check, and we both agreed on and worked on that 50-50 agreement for another 5 years. Then in kind of 2003, kind of started our genetic index kind of passion. We had an Uno daughter that ended up becoming our main focus in our herd that goes back to the Roxy cow family. And this kind of brought in the other kind of gave us a source of a vision of seeing other income in the farm other than milk sales and the show cattle. And so then we've changed our focus to red and whites and red carriers. Nearly 95% of our herd is red or red carrier. In 2016, I married my beautiful wife, Kelsey, and she is the pusher for me. The only reason I'm standing up here today is probably because of her. And we get to work side by side every day and have our family there on the farm. So it is an awesome experience, kind of the experience I grew up with my mom and dad. It was very family oriented on the farm. So then we it was purchased 73 acres in the buildings, and then we rented all the equipment, rented the rent-to-own agreement on all the machinery. I soon found out later on that the machinery thing wasn't what I wanted to do, so we ended up selling some of the machinery, kept all the tractors and the mixers and stuff like that, but kind of focused on, once we purchased the farm, focused on the cattle, and I knew that's what I was good at, And every time I was in a tractor, I wanted to be in the barn. So we end up hiring all our field work is custom done. Every once in a while, I'll pop in a tractor for a few hours, but that's enough of my tractor time. So yeah, kind of another breakdown is we started with our first employee in 2016, increased the milking herd size to 160 cows, and rented a few other buildings. We started raising all our own heifers and raising all our own all our own bulls and selling bulls as jumper bulls. So we were currently, before our last expansion, had cattle on 7 different properties. In 2019, we purchased another facility for bred heifers from Dave Erickson. So the farm is 368 acres. We purchased another section of the farm with a building on it to kind of be our next step in the process. And then we built an employee house. We found that having housing for if we were going to have employees was a must. And then after that, we started getting in the discussions of wanting to have full-time hired milking hands and focus. Our genetic business was growing so much that we wanted to move on to focusing a lot more on our genetics. So then we started meeting with a dairy consultant and came up with a plan put together to expand our milking herd to 400 cows. We went from 250 cows to 400 cows in a year's time, and it was all building within, not purchasing any other females off the farm. Currently, we're running 800 acres of crops. We rent 3 farms, 5 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees, milking right now 400 cows through a tie stall barn. And we raise all our heifers, and we sell about 150 bulls to other farmers for jumper bulls, and about 20 to 30 bulls to AI every year. So this is kind of a really cool picture. Kind of the 2011 is when we purchased the farm, and really the only buildings on the farm were the 50-stall tie stall barn, a machine shed, and then a small little heifer shed. And then on the right is we went through an expansion last year. We built onto the freestall barn, put in a 5.4 million gallon manure pit, and also a heifer shed. All right, so some things that we had to kind of go through and figure out was the biggest thing, being a young farmer and being kind of naive and not knowing exactly how to run the farm as a business. We set up the farm as an LLC, did estate planning, kind of met with a dairy consultant and kind of really hound out on what our future goals were and what it was going to take to get there and how we were going to get there. And then we would set goals, 5 years. We wanted to build the freestall barn, and then another 5 years we wanted to do another addition in dry cow facilities, and now our next 5-year goal is a milking parlor, and it's always setting the goals and trying to kind of navigate how we're going to get there. And these are just some of the things that learning to be a boss and having labor, it's all really big changes for somebody that's never had that and they were their own boss. So some things in the works, like I said, is feed storage, a calf barn, parlor, some bull facilities, IVF labs, some niche market things we'd like to do with our genetic side. But this is our young family here on the farm. And that is, I probably missed something, but there we go.
Well, we've heard from 2 speakers who have been the generation transitioning into the farm, and now we're about to hear from someone who is transitioning the operation and done so successfully, obviously, for 5 generations. It's my pleasure to introduce John Shane, who is that 5th-generation farmer at Shane Farms, which was established in the 1850s on the rolling hills of the Mississippi River in southeast Missouri. He's a graduate of Oak Ridge High School and attended Southeast Missouri University. But John's true learning came from listening, reading, attending seminars, going on farm tours, and not being afraid of new trends and technologies. His inspirations came from dairy extension specialists that he worked with through the years. I had a really good high school guidance counselor who told me that you're never going to grow as a person if you don't read books, meet people, or go places, and that can't be a more profound statement. It's true, and John's going to bear that out with his discussion. While managing that dairy farm, he has overseen the expansion of several projects, including modern freestall barns and a state-of-the-art milking parlor. John is also very, very involved off-farm, serving on various dairy boards, including Prairie Farms, where he serves on the board of directors, St. Louis Dairy Council. He's the chairman of the Dairy Committee of the Missouri Farm Bureau, is on the board of Missouri Dairies Association, Missouri's State Milk Board, and he has held various seats in the Missouri Holstein Association. John is really proud that his wife and children, all 3 of them, are involved with the farm and appreciates the involvement of his grandchildren, who are going to be the 7th generation to take over Shane Farms. Ladies and gentlemen, please hear from John Shane himself just how that's going to come about.
I'm going to go ahead and get into this presentation, and she pretty well explained that most of what we've done. Kind of a hard act to follow whenever you look at our generations, and our first person here, she's got a lot more years than we do. So anyway, this is our first big addition we did. We did a freestall barn. Our German ancestors had one problem. They didn't like to spend money. So we had to work through that for several generations. And we began selling cream at a local creamery in 1900, and that was all hand milking yet. Until we had the New Deal with the WPA project, we did not have electric in the rural areas of Missouri until 1936. Immediately, the dairy business changed, and we all got electric milkers and cooling, which, if anybody remembers the old spring coolers, the water went in one side, milk cans sit in the water, and water went out the other side warmer. That was a big change in Missouri. This is my family. As you can tell, we have kids were all in school when we took pictures with the older generation. Pretty well everybody is there. The one on the right is a full-time employee that's been with me for over 20 years. The rest of it is family. The center picture is that 7th generation that's coming. Very proud of them. They pretty well spend at least 4 or 5 days on the after-school session. The bus lets them off right there at the farm. Couldn't get any better than that. Now, our little guy on the right, I think he's going to be a veterinarian. Because at that age, if he's being happy drenching a cow, he's in a better mood than I am. Okay, here's some of our pictures of heifer facilities that we're very proud of. We have built it as a transition from, I think at one time we had 11 pens of heifers in 3 counties. It was a nightmare to keep everything going, and we came up with this idea to build a heifer facility, which is the bottom picture in the middle, and we raise calves like everybody else does, and then we put them in there with training slats. From there, they graduate up for a pen or 2, and then they go out into the pasture until they're old enough to breed. We've got cattle on pasture. The center picture is where we're at right now, the building in the middle with angle. That is our parlor that we built in 2019. We have a bedding pack for cows having calves, and then we also have a dry cow and transition barn that we built where the old facility milking was at. We milk about 350 cows. The acreage is there. We have a lot of rolling hill ground that should never be taken out of pasture. That's a big issue in this country right now. We want to raise beans, corn, and cotton, but we sure don't look at what it's doing to our pasture. Our milk parlor was built in 19, and it's been a big game changer. We had way too many years of an old double 4, expanded to a double 8, another remodel job. After a while, you just can't fix the antique. So that's how we ended up building a new milking facility. As you can see here, my sister handles the calf feeding. She does an excellent job. She has less than 0.5% death rate. My wife handles the accounting side of the business. Thank God. Because when it comes to accounting, you got to have somebody that knows what they're doing, and you can't ignore it. My daughter handles human resources, training milkers, milk quality, and she picks out the bulls and does the AI breeding most of the time. My 2 sons help with equipment, agronomy, transitioning cows, feeding heifers, and then we also have our full-time employees. This is our milking parlor. As you can tell, it was cold that day when they took these pictures. But we have a reader that records everybody's milk weights in the parlor on a screen and in our office. And if we have any big discrepancies on percentage of production, it'll flag it, and we have a catch room in the back. We can program it in the computer, and when the cows leave, it'll catch them. That is a big game changer when you want to catch sickness or mastitis early. It has really been a big help. We milk twice a day, morning and evening. Family handles most of the milking at night. We average about 84 pounds of milk a day. And we have the technology in place to monitor milk quality. We've been on DHIA for more years than I want to count. Cow comfort is a big thing. We have our calves on the left. We have transition dry cows in the middle. And then we have our heifer facilities. We use the RFD tags with the Cow Manager program for health and reproductive monitoring. It works great with a satellite sender for our heifer barn. It's a 1/4 mile away from the dairy facility, but it works very well. Any way that you can monitor the health of the reproduction of your heifers that you're wanting to breed is very, very advantageous. We were lucky enough to have a Missouri Dairy Hall of Honors in 22. That is a industry-wide group that acknowledges people in the dairy business, in the processing industry, and the extension industry. It's been around for several years, and it's a good program. The dairy farm challenges to us is to grow or not to grow. We have almost a dairy desert where we're at, Missouri. We only have about 8 dairies in a 3-county area, and all of our equipment people have to come from Illinois. That's about 100+ miles away. Veterinary care, we have a vet that comes to visit us once every 2 weeks, and he does a repro work for our county and beef cattle, dairy cattle. We've got lots of dog and cat vets, but nobody with enough finesse that wants to take on large animals. The transition programs that the first speaker talked about is a great place to go. The International Farm Transition Network is located in Ireland, and they have several states in the U.S. that are involved. Missouri isn't one of them. But there are so many resources for transitions, and some of the work is great when it works right, but when you need to have a facilitator, it's money well spent, because sometimes you've got to make that first step to do that. So I'm going to say that's about all I've got at this time.
Three different scenarios, completely different, and all have experienced transitions successfully. Do we have any questions to get started with? Again, please feel free to approach that microphone and ask. Can I pick on you first, Trent?
Sure.
I find Trent's situation really interesting because I know there are a lot of young producers who are faced with their parents, a successful dairy operation, are not ready to give up the reins, or they've got younger brothers and sisters, and so working into the home operation isn't really an option. And Trent figured out a way to do that. Clearly, he said he started a conversation with David Erickson, but my question for you, Trent, is how do you build trust and confidence when you're not blood that you can take over? And what kind of conversations did you have with David to assure him and make this move forward?
Like I said, Dave knew me growing up, which was a plus, and knew our family and knew that I had an extreme passion in Holsteins, and he was also a Holstein breeder, so he kind of had the same mentality of what I was looking to do. So immediately we kind of bonded together in the aspect of we were in it for the cow. And so then, when I moved over there, Dave didn't have to, but every day I'd come into the farm at 4:00 in the morning, and out stepped Dave from the house, and he would be out there mixing feed for me. He was on the farm every day with me, and almost acting as a mentor or a father type figure. And he treated us like family, and we treated him like family back, and we both put in 100% effort, and I think that kind of got the process of trust and building that relationship. And then when we had stuff we wanted to talk about of like purchasing the farm, that was one of the things that we immediately talked about, because we were renting it and with dreams and goals of owning our own farm, and he was very transparent that he wanted to see the farm be a farm. And so that immediately gave us the interest of we're going to work for this farm, because we have the opportunity with him that he wants to see this stay a farm.
And at this point, Trent, has he transferred all of his assets to you and Kelsey?
So we own the farm is 368 acres, and we own 100 acres of it currently. Actually, it's kind of funny. Last week, we just signed a first refusal agreement with Dave and with his sons to kind of set up the next transition plan when either him or his wife pass away. They want to move forward with the farm, and are kind of waiting for one of them to pass to move things through, and we have a contract together and kind of a price set up, which is a nice thing, because now we kind of know that we're in it for the long haul. And we had that conversation before we expanded. We wanted to stay here, but we wanted to make sure we had the land and stuff. So like we were always transparent in talking with Dave and kind of setting our goals up and putting it on paper and kind of keeping as his like death stuff got set up. He wanted to make sure that his sons, his wife didn't have to do anything as far as setting the price or making sure we got the farm.
And I have a question for all of you seated here in the audience. Could I see a show of hands? Those of you that are currently farming with a family member or in partnership with children or are in the midst of transition. Jeff? There's some hands. Okay, so obviously a pertinent topic for all of you. I have a question for, I guess, John next, if there's no other questions from the floor. John, you showed us some beautiful facilities for raising your replacements, facilities for your transition cows. It's clear that you and your family members are very dedicated to cow comfort, and you've built facilities to do just that. Have you given consideration to the people that manage those cows, and how has creating facilities and making improvements to improve the working conditions at Shane Farms factored into your decision making?
Well, I think it all really started with a Holstein field man that took a lot of Missouri producers to Texas in the early 80s. His name was Darrell Robertson. He knew how to promote new facilities that he had already seen in Texas, Oklahoma, and it was a game changer for me and our farm. Darrell knew what it took if we were going to stay in business in Missouri. Him and Barry Stevens, our deer dairy expansion specialist, we had 2 tour buses. We went down there for 5 days, and we went from one end of the Texas, almost New Mexico. But it was a very eye-opening thing on cow comfort, housing cattle, milking cows, TMR. Those are all things that I brought home. And people like Darrell knew the buyers, knew the sellers. He sold semen. He knew the people that were passionate about the registered Holstein and the dairy business. He made it a point to put a lot of miles on that old car, going to see people. But he was very instrumental in where we're at, and I have never forgot that. So that kind of covers that.
And again, please, folks, feel free to join in with questions, because I have many, but I don't want to be hogging the microphone. So please ask questions as well. Next question's for you, Betsy. You brought it back around to what Jared shared with us during the first session, that it's really important to have the right people on the bus. And you said that those off-farm advisors that have been critical to your success. Would you mind digging into that a little deeper and telling us who has been essential to your success in transitioning?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have long-term accountants that certainly knew where all the bodies were buried on the farm and kind of what the farm structure was, so that their input was crucial. Our attorneys certainly have educated us over time as to what the corporate structure can and can't do for us. And I definitely am remiss if I don't recognize the tremendous advantage that we had that my parents, the older generation, were both active participants in the whole process and just in their mindset that, sure, let's give it a try. They were dedicated enough to making sure that the farm had the ability to continue over time, that they were happy to engage in those conversations. We've also, from an advisor standpoint, since 2000, since we came back, we've participated in the Dairy Farm Business Summary at Cornell, and I think having those metrics, being able to create over time those cool graphs that we saw in our first presentation and what's the business doing over time, that's been extremely helpful for us.
And Betsy, was that a relationship built as an alumnus of Cornell University, or can anyone sign up for that type of a program and evaluation?
That's actually a program that's through ProDairy at Cornell, which is their extension kind of framework, and I think Farm Credit does something similar as far as summaries. But having the ability to look at the business performance over time, both comparing to ourselves over time and comparing to different cohorts that are doing change over the same time, is really important. And any other, there are feed folks, and we all have different service providers that we work with on farm. We tend to select those that are lovely people to work with, but aren't afraid to ask questions of what you're doing that, why again.
And John, I'm going to come back to you with a question. You made mention that it's your sister who's managing the calves at Shane Farms. So does your sister have any children? Or can you explain the relationship? Because yours is a unique situation where you've got your core family, and your sister's part of the operation as well, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I've kind of skipped a little bit of the presentation, but we have a brother-in-law and his son, and they are basically in charge of TMR work. My sister is in charge of calf work. We are a corporate structure. I didn't say that earlier, but we are shareholders, and as we get older, we have started to move some shares over to the next generation, and we are a C Corp. We have, through the years, working with different dairy industry corporations, that a tax advantage is not real good for a C or S corporation compared to a partnership or a single owner. But we have that structure in place where the bylaws are so important in the corporate structure, and the shareholder rights and what they can do, what they cannot do. This is all part of a transition with a corporate structure, and I really have confidence in it because it has rules in place that they may not like them at times. No family transition is a bed of roses, and if you think it is, you're in Disneyland, because there's always going to be something come up. Somebody's got a different plan. The 3 things that you need to do whenever you have a corporation is you've got to meet to review the past year's financials. You need to have an agenda, and you need to be able to tell the people in the room, give them a week before you meet, and have room to listen. You can communicate and expose everything you want, but when you've got one person with negativity, you gotta listen to them. That is a big factor in any type of a structure of the transition, from what I can tell.
Well, and it's hard not to notice, as each of you have given your individual presentations, that there have been significant improvements made to each of your properties, again, in terms of caring for the animals and facilitating business on each of your farms. Can each of you speak to how you went about that? Were there any grants that you were able to apply for, or given your youth, maybe Trent and Betsy, were you able to secure youth loans or advantages in that way that you could make those improvements that might not have been possible for the older generation to have done? Now I'll make you fight over the microphones.
One thing that we did participate in was the Young Farmer program. When we purchased the farm, we locked in a lower interest rate at 30-year terms, which made it a lot more appealing to us. So when we built the freestall, a percent of those long terms went towards the freestall barn, and then the other percent went towards the purchase of the farmland and the buildings. So that gave us an opportunity to have a locked-in low interest rate for a 30-year term, which made it a little more easier for a young person to purchase a farm. And then as far as grants, the only other grant we've participated in and haven't received the money yet, but we had share funding on our manure pit. So.
Yeah, I don't recall that we did anything that was really specific to Young Farmer. I think looking back on it now in my 50s, which is weird, I think when we were in our 20s, we were pretty okay with working those 17, 18, however many hour days, and a lot of sweat and just duct tape and creativity around. You notice I didn't show pictures of our parlor because it's still creatively put together, I think. So again, I think we leveraged some things like that. We did some financing that was pretty creative as far as purchasing some additional assets for the farm through family members and some kind of not traditional lender sort of arrangements in that regard to kind of keep things moving forward.
And I got kind of one thing to add is, like I mentioned in my first talks, the landowner also, like for the machinery and stuff, did a rent to own, interest-free dollar buyout at the end type of deal. So he locked in the machinery for, I think it was 20 years for us, so we didn't have to go to the bank to buy the machinery and pay interest on it. And it was a good deal for them because they didn't receive all the money at once, and it's been a nice long payout here for them.
Any other questions from the crowd? You guys are being way too passive and letting us just have a conversation in front of you. This isn't television. Feel free to jump right in here and ask questions as you desire. I have another one for you, John, specifically because you made mention of the division of powers at Shane Farms. You've got your sister feeding calves, your daughter taking care of milk quality and training milkers, and everybody's got an assigned duty. The kids or the younger sons of yours, you said, are managing the crops and agronomy operation. How did you bring about that division of powers? Was that all? Is everybody doing what they love to do? Were you blessed in that way that everyone's doing what they wish to do? Are there some of you who are doing something that must be done, but it's not your life's passion on the dairy? And how do you address that?
Well, I guess you'd say I have a philosophy. If they're 13 or 14 and they can't tear the gates off of the barn, they need to start. Take that skid steer, take that side-by-side, go check some calves, go do this, go do that. The kids don't want the money at that age. They want the challenges. They want the, I can do it, Grandpa. I can do it, Dad. Those are things that made my children grow up and want to do what they're doing. I, like anybody else, there's times I had to be away. In this business, everybody has health issues as you get older, and it seemed like if they had the challenge that Dad wasn't going to be there, they stepped up. I was very fortunate. I never really pushed my kids, but I've got them in a position where they can take care of a lot of things mechanical. My nephew is a very great steel fabricator. He went to work off the farm but came back. His dad is looking at retirement too down the road. We're all getting that close. And my kids, I didn't even push them into it. We used to do all the electrical and all the plumbing, but all of a sudden I've got one that takes care of fans. He takes care of electrical. The other one takes care of the plumbing. Boy, that made my job a lot easier. And so I think what is the biggest thing that I have impressed is that every job on our farm, there needs to be at least two people that can do it. Making feed, going out and working ground, hauling manure. Those are all things. We have a truck, we haul a lot of commodities, bedding, and my two sons also have a CDL license because we have to go out of state. Not too many farms have got that luxury. So when I'm here, if somebody's got to go get feed in Illinois, they can do it. So we've got a good structure going here, and that's about where we're at.
Thank you. And Betsy, you've still got your parents, and is your grandmother still with you? How have you worked out that transition? You've got an older generation that has opinions, I'm sure, but how have you worked that out that you and Bill were able to make management decisions and proceed with them? And to what degree did or do your parents still have input?
My parents are 100% with us, and like I said earlier in my intro, that's an ongoing process. They're both people who are pretty passionate about the cows. They're pretty passionate about, what's going on the farm, but their roles are very different today. Their roles are not the nitty gritty of what are we making for decisions, maybe specific to longer term planning around the farm, but they certainly want to be engaged in that, and they certainly do like being engaged in kind of the day to day, whether it's more conversational at this point, I think, whether it's conversations around breeding decisions or goals in that regard, or whether it's conversations about that might start like, what exactly is it that you're building over there again? Really they, like I said, were very fortunate. They were at a point in their careers where they were looking positively at the opportunity to cede some of those really nitty gritty business decisions to someone else, and fortunate that we were interested in making some of those as we really got into the transition piece. So they're not, I think, upset that they're not doing the day-to-day decision-making stuff, but they definitely still want to be involved, and that's an ongoing, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
And I'm going to turn that question around now and ask Sydney and Will, how old are those? Are your children?
So Sydney's 19, and Will is 14. So, it's interesting to see their interests evolve and just what they're looking at. And, I give our first speaker absolute gold stars for, we also feel like it's very important for them to have experiences both on our farm and off our farm. Mm-hmm. Sydney's just completed her freshman year in college and is doing a summer internship at another farm this summer. So she certainly appears to be very interested in the farm, but we feel like it's very important for her to have those experiences on other farms and whether it's in industry as well. So she has that perspective if she decides that she wants to come back to Turner sometime.
Tremendous opportunity. And like you say, you worked with Cargill for a number of years before returning to the farm. So again, you had a chance to be on many, many operations before returning. And I'm sure you brought good ideas with you, as well as relationships that have only furthered things as you're owning and managing your own operation.
Absolutely. And I think on the good ideas, but even more importantly, we got to experience some, observe some decisions that didn't look like they had worked out fabulously well. And hopefully we took that information and, kind of made some of our own decisions, so we could not make someone else's bad decisions. We could make our own and move on to maybe make good decisions as a result of those.
Well, and Trent, I want to go back to you too, because while Betsy's children are 14 and 19, and John, your children also are mature, you've got little children. Let's talk a little bit about that life balance that Jared brought up, because yours is a generation that is doing it all. You've got little children that are going to be interested in off-farm activities too. How do you and Kelsey balance life and business?
There is no balance. With a 7, 5, 3, and a 1-year-old, life is crazy. And now it is kind of our last expansion. We were able to have full-time milkers and a full-time feeder, and so it has given us the opportunity to be here today, and in the future be there for our kids. And that's one thing that I see our kids growing up so fast already. It's like I don't want to miss that. They are very hands-on on the farm. I was doing all the milking and very, very involved in like that 3 hours every day or 6 hours every day of milking. I really didn't have time to do stuff with the kids. So we kind of made that work-life balance with now is like in the afternoons, my mornings are packed. My afternoons, it's just like all the stuff that the kids can kind of do stuff with us on the farm. And then my wife, she feeds all the calves, and there's usually 2 or 3 kids out there feeding calves with her. We kind of got jobs where we can bring them along with us most of the time. And we don't live close to any relatives. That's one of the things too. It's like we don't have that person to watch our kids, while we're doing the farm work and stuff. It's one thing we've had to kind of figure out. The kids are with us, and they're farming. So whether it's always good or bad, some days it gets to be long days and nights out at the outside, and you don't get in till 10 o'clock at night. But it's just something that the kids are always with us on the farm.
Well, and I believe each of you brought up that you have gone from relying on family help to run all facets of the farm to engaging employees. Could you speak to that? What are the unique challenges of making things work with just family labor, and how is that different when you employ people that are non-family to assist with the operation?
Well, I think that's a big transition. I mean, I think for us anyways, it's forced us to add a little bit more clarity in what our expectations are, both in job roles and who's, John explained it well. Each person kind of has their own responsibilities, and I think we're more apt to be clear about that. We're more apt to be consistent about that because we have to with employees, where I find that, with family, there's certainly a tendency towards more gray areas and maybe a little bit less structure there. So that's been a transition for us for sure, as we have more, we have 9 employees, so we're depending on them to do the quality of work that allows us to be here this week for this convention, and we're delighted to have them. But that's always a continuing learning process for us, because maybe that's not our default setting to be continually working on human resources, to continually work on training and those things that are really important to make sure that part of the business is running smoothly enough to support continued growth, to support continued, improvements along the way as well.
And Betsy, if I might ask, are you and Bill the first generation to have hired help, or did your parents also have hired help as you were growing up on the farm?
So my parents definitely had hired help. I think the approach was different, and I think that's kind of what I mean when I think about clarity and creating clearer expectations, providing clearer expectations. And I think at 55 cows, or at one point I think they had 3 tie stall barns, because one inefficient tie stall barn wasn't enough. You need to have 3 of those. So I think there was a lot more overlap, and in hindsight, they have indicated that they thought probably some more structure would have helped. So that's been an interesting set of conversations with them as well, to see how that relationship with employees and those expectations with employees differs today than it might have 25 years ago.
And John, you said your daughter manages HR on your operation. Can you speak to that too?
Okay, my daughter, she's the only one that really worked off of the farm, because I knew she was going to be like a cat trying to herd them. It's pretty hard. And we kind of let her do her thing. She worked at a local feed store for a while, but she had children, and then she said, I am ready to come back to the farm. And her HR work has been very good. After COVID, the whole work ethic of a lot of kids changed drastically. And so we have, since November, hired some Hispanic help, legal, and it's been a good process. It's the easiest thing I've ever jumped into with both feet, and I'm surprised, but it's working. You go through the proper agencies to help get your help, and my daughter is totally happy. We were having some egg cell count problems. That is a problem in the South. We run a lot of higher egg cell count. We got some of our help in here and got them trained. They do exactly as what my daughter wants, because I sure wouldn't want to argue with her. And we're seeing a 30% decrease in egg cell count from where we was a year ago. And I think it's just the work ethic of these people, that you instill them, that you have respect for them, and you will work with them, and they will work for you.
And communicated protocols. It sounds like your daughter's doing an exceptional job of what, again, Jared shared with us this morning. Communications is key to everything. And Trent, you touched on it, but I'd like to revisit. You said that you and Kelsey have actually built housing facilities now for your employees to help, again, keep that a viable part of your operation. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so kind of the start of everything too was, I came from a family that, we always did the work as a family, and it was all family run, and we never took a vacation. If we went for a vacation, it was for the afternoon, and we had to be back for milking. To make that step into having employees was a very hard and challenging one. My wife and I thought, oh, we can do it all, but then you can't. And so then that was the issue, and we started getting employees, and it wasn't working well, and we thought, maybe we'll go robotic, but we still needed employees. And then we went to the Hispanic labor, and it was one thing that I thought I was never going to do, but it's the only people that want to work, and so then with that comes challenges. Write paperwork, and housing. A lot of them don't have vehicles, so and then we're 8 miles from the nearest town, so they need to get to and from in the wintertime on not nice roads. So that was in our aspect of putting up a house for them, to get half the employees right next to the farm, so we could still get through the morning or night chores with that labor force that was close to the farm. And then we also rent an apartment that's 8 miles away. But there's the other challenges of finding housing. We're so close to Madison that the rental rates and stuff is extremely high. So it comes with extra cost, and you gotta and provide that for them, because they're not gonna to retain employees. That was one of the steps that we needed to do, was provide the housing for. So, and learning to be a boss was the second biggest challenge. And being the guy that is in charge of HR, charge of training, in charge of hiring and firing is sometimes the hardest part of. I feel today that is the hardest part of my job, is being the boss and manager of the employees.
You wear many hats.
Yeah.
We have approximately 15 minutes left with this session. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask?
I think, as far as, there's no one specific thing I would do different in the transition. I think John said it well earlier. If you think that the transition process is all going to be roses and smooth, and that's not true. I mean, that's whether it's Disneyland or kind of a fantasy sort of scenario. So, compressing 25 years of transition into today, we're happy with where we are. I mean, obviously we have some challenging conversations about what does that next transition look like. But, the rear view mirror is really small. The windshield's a lot bigger. So no, there's not something specific that I would change.
I would say that the biggest thing to do is remember the communication, the listening, transparency, good financial records. You've got to have all those to be a successful farm, but that transition revolves around all of those factors. We can ignore some of them, but they're going to come back to haunt you. The first presentation dealt with a lot of that, but the questions asked, is there somebody that has got a negativity in the meeting that needs to be addressed? What do we need to hear from you? Or do you want to meet again in a week and you got time to think about it? There's always going to be that possibility that you've got a skunk person in the room.
I think there's a couple things that I would touch on that, being a going from a young or on my parents' farm to directly onto our own farm. One thing I would encourage, like we've talked about, is getting out. I wish I would have done a few more internships on larger dairies, or another dairy of the size that we are now, and getting more experience of on farm, other than just my parents' farm. That's one thing that I really had to learn and grow from. Coming from, every farm is different, and you got to look at look at all the aspects of the farm. And I wish I would have had more experience on different farming structures before I moved into where we are today. And then the second thing that I would have changed differently is just a couple years ago was the first time we had a real financial advisor and a dairy consultant. I would have wished I would have started that process earlier on in my farming career to kind of set goals and really break down the accounting part of our farm, because it was just Kelsey and I doing all the accounting and everything like that. And so I wish I would have earlier on kind of had that infrastructure set up for our farm.
Thank you. And another question from the floor, please.
Speakers. Trent, I have a follow-up question for you. You did a great job going out on your own, but what are your parents going to be doing with their farm?
So that was kind of one of the factors of us. One of the factors of us going out on our own. I had a younger brother, my brother Brooks. He is on the farm with my parents currently. And they need to have a meeting with the first speaker and figure out what they're going to do. And that is kind of one of the things that I look back on. I always dreamed of farming with my mom and dad. That was my life goal, and it was kind of a little like disheartening when we did go out on our own, because then I'd missed that experience of working with my mom and dad side by side. So it was a big hurdle to come over, but now looking back, we've built this beautiful farm. We're raising our own family here. I don't have anybody else to make decisions with, and so it besides my wife, and it's got to. So we are our own entity and our own farm, and that's what I enjoy. Looking back, I would love to say that I'm farming with my mom and dad, but they had no intentions of expanding at the time, and it was going to be hard to take two incomes on their farm there. So they're going through trying to figure out the transition into my brothers, and they're sit right on the edge of town, and land could sell by the square foot, so it is kind of a tough situation there that I don't envy my brother and my family for having to figure that out.
Any other questions? Well, one final one, and this is maybe a little bit to Jeffrey's point, but in a positive way. Can you share with us perhaps what the greatest gift your predecessor gave you was? If you were going to be speaking to, because all of us seated here in this room today are in either a position to transition to or be transitioned to. So as those of you who are in a position to transfer your assets to a younger generation or to someone perhaps not even related to you, what is the greatest gift that person can give you?
And I'll say this, and not to sound corny, but my whole farming career is kind of based around the Holstein cow and people that were passionate about the Holstein cow. And that passion is for the Holsteins is what has got us to farming and where we are today. And both my parents and Dave, the gentleman that we took over the farm for, were both very passionate Holstein breeders, and kind of the reason I want to farm today is to better the Holstein breed, and I think that giving us that passion for both people to install that in me today is kind of it.
I would say that this young man, to have somebody mentor him to make what he has got, we need more of that in the dairy business. We have too many farms that go, I'm shutting the doors. I don't want to hear that vacuum pump in the mornings. But, you know, if we don't work with that next mentored young farmer, we're going to keep going on a pathway here that it's not good. There's a lot of good young men out here that need that mentoring to work with them. It's not necessarily family, but it needs to be done in our industry.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. I mean, I think we all need to be open to those new opportunities that come up, whether it's a mentoring specifically sort of arrangement and just maintain an open mind, maybe our farm looks different. I mean, I'm sure our farm will look different 10 years from now. It certainly looks different than it did 10 years ago and 25 years ago. But I think that's probably the greatest advantage that my parents and, my grandfather kind of passed was just maintain that sort of open mind and don't be shy. Don't be shy about, making changes and being open, making sure that you're open to opportunities that come out there. And certainly that will be an advantage going forward.
Well, thank you all three. We wish you all continued success and continued successful transitions to future generations. It's clear that in each of these scenarios, you've got some pretty eager people in the wings that are looking to take over at some point. And it's gratifying to know that all of you are forward thinking and looking towards that next generation taking over the reins at some point as well. So thank you.